here so they can introduce the next speaker.
Thank you, Denise. I'm sorry you have to hear from me twice a day, twice in one day. But again, I'm Chris Jackson from FedEx office. And this afternoon, I had the honor of introducing your afternoon speaker, Mr. Paul Meshanko, and to also welcome him back because he has been here before. So Paul, CSP, is an author, professional speaker, and thought leader with over 25 years of experience in leadership development and organizational cultural change. He's known for his down-to-earth, humorous and engaging style. And I have to tell you, I saw him on YouTube and I agree with that. And he's captivated over 500,000 leaders and business professionals on 5 continents. His educational materials have been translated into over 25 different languages, and his newsletter is read by thousands of subscribers each month. He was awarded the National Speakers Association's coveted CSP designation in 2019. His first book, Conversations on Success, was released in May 2006, and his second book, The Respect Effect, Using the Science of Neuroleadership to Inspire a More Loyal and Productive Workplace, was released by McGraw-Hill in 2013. He holds a BSBA from Ohio State University and an MBA from Baldwin College. He's a husband and father and currently lives in Atlanta with his wife, Sheila. And he's also a proud father like Mr. Covey is, and he has 2 children, and I'll let him brag about them. Please join me in welcoming Paul Meshanko to the podium.
All right, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank Chris, first of all, for that really nice introduction. As fellow trainers and many of you speakers, I'm sure you have many stories about being introduced that may not have fully showcased your background and all your rich attributes that you bring to the podium. So right before the pandemic, I was doing some work with a client in Cleveland. And one of my colleagues that was also in Cleveland, he called me up because he knew I was in town and said, "Hey, Paul, I've got a fabulous speaking opportunity for you." I said, "Well, tell me a little bit about it. Like, first of all, when is it?" He said, "Tomorrow." So when you're called and asked to speak tomorrow, what does that normally mean? You were not the originally intended talent. And I knew that, but I wanted to help out. I wanted to be really helpful. And so I showed up, and it was a Chamber of Commerce in the Beechwood, Ohio area. I don't know if many of you know much about Cleveland. And the fellow who introduced me, unlike Chris, had never met me, hadn't read my bio. So he got up to the podium after lunch and he said, "Okay, everybody, it's time for our presentation. I'm not sure who our after lunch presenter is, and I'm not sure what he's going to be talking about. So in case he's good, let's get on with it. In case he's not, let's get it over with." So Chris, thanks for sharing the love a little bit. All right. We are going to be going through it. I realize that this is kind of a precarious slot because the only thing between you and a cold beverage is me. So I'm going to do my best to keep it moving quickly, keep it engaged, and hopefully keep it content filled for things that you can use. The program is called The Respect Effect, Tools for Creating a Rock Solid Work Culture. And just a little bit of background on our company. I started Legacy Business Cultures back in 1997 in Cleveland, Ohio. We've been doing this kind of work for, it's hard to imagine, almost 28 years now. We are a GSA certified female-owned small business. So if any of you are looking for a little bit, you have to get some check marks in those boxes and you like what we do, reach out to us afterwards. Our core competencies are all around culture, whether it's diversity and inclusion, navigating and managing and leading change, or the leadership elements around that. That's what we do. We don't do most of the technical stuff. We give you a little snapshot of some of the clients we work with. Here's the thing. If it's about culture, it doesn't really matter whether it's the government or a private sector client. How many of you would agree culture is important? Culture will make or break an organization. So that's pretty much what we do. The content we're going to be going through today is based off, in large part, the research I did for my book, The Respect Effect. And so what we're going to do is the handout, and those of you, everybody should have a handout. There's plenty at each table. There's a couple tables that have extras if you need one. And if you didn't, you can actually scan this barcode and get a digital copy also. So I'll leave that up there for a second. It's also in your handout, your electronic app packet that you got too. So you should be able to get a packet pretty easily. Now, our goals. I have to be done, I think they said by 7 o'clock tonight. So I'm going to be going pretty quickly. First is to have a little bit of fun. How many of you are okay with that? My dad said a long time ago when he was still alive, he said, you know, Paul, we're not here for a long time. We're here for a good time. How many of you agree with that philosophy? Now, he told me that as I was heading out the door to my freshman year at the Ohio State University. So my mother didn't think his timing was all that great. Because I did. It could explain the 5-year plan. I don't know. But anyways, we are going to have a little bit of fun today. We're going to explore what true respect is and how it supports world-class operational results, regardless of what agency, what department you work with. I think you're going to see lots of relevant applications for what we're going to talk about. This is my promise. I'm going to teach you and give you some time to practice a technique for building a bridge of respect to other people, literally in a matter of minutes. And when you see how it works and how easy it is, it's something you're going to be able to use the rest of your week right here. And I would challenge you to use it and say, no, this doesn't work. It works really, really well. And then ultimately to give you some practical ideas for championing a respectful culture, not only in your organization, but also in your community. How many of you think our communities could use a little help with respect, right? Okay. So now I'm going to make it interactive and ask you a question. Why focus on respect? Here we are, May 2023. There's so many other things we could be talking about. Why respect? From your perspective, what would we get from that? Anybody? First things that come to your mind. More collaboration. Absolutely. What else? Growth. Absolutely. Say flexibility. Oh, yes, absolutely. Value. Oh, feeling valued as an employee. Absolutely. And that's going to actually become part of the definition that we talk about. You had your hand up over here. Understanding. All of those are absolutely fabulous reasons. But I'm going to start with something a little bit different. It's because as a country, as a world, we need it right now, more so than ever, probably. Dr. Martin Luther King said years ago, decades ago, people fail to get along because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other, and they don't know each other because they have not communicated with each other. I'm going to paint a definition of respect today that I really want you to think about. Respect is an active process. You can't just show up and say, I'm respectful, take my word for it. You actually have to behave your way into it. Stephen Covey's father, Dr. Stephen Covey, he once said, and I love this quote, you can't talk your way out of something you behaved your way into. That goes with disrespect. How many of you agree with that, right? So, but let's go back to the work world just for a second here, because all of the things that you said, the collaboration, the trust, the feeling valued, that's all relevant for the business experience. I'd like you to think about respect as an umbrella, okay? At a high level, when we cultivate this thing called respect in our organizations, here's what you need to understand we're doing. We're making an investment in the organization. It has to be, and I'll explain why, the foundation for any progress in your diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives. Without respect, you will never get to inclusion, period. We have to master that first. How many of you track employee engagement in your departments or agencies? Okay, we know that being treated with respect is a primary driver for being willing to engage myself. Bringing, as one client very poetically put it in Buffalo, if I'm not treated with respect, I don't bring my give a shit to work with me. How many of you have ever been to a place and you ask yourself, do I really want to do this? Right? One of the big topics right now is emotional safety. So critical. How many of your organizations are talking about emotional safety, right? Without emotional safety, you're never going to fully tap into some of the other things like innovation and creativity. So emotional safety, really important. We'll link it to pride and loyalty. And then at a more granular level, we can look at things like recruiting. It becomes much easier to hire and keep your best talent in whatever geography you're in when we have a reputation of being a place where people are treated with respect. Fewer EEOC issues. Anybody have to go through the misery of a harassment or discrimination complaint and note all the hours that get spent into interviewing people? And if we proactively focus on respect, guess what? We don't have to do that nearly as often. Healthier, I'm going to make the case and share with you some really interesting data on the fact that respect actually makes us physically healthier. Coming out of COVID, how many of you could use a little healthier work environment, right? And we're going to be healthier and just flat out more productive. Now, how many of you have seen that umbrellas come in all shapes and sizes, right? Anybody in here have one of those little pocket umbrellas that fits nicely into a purse or something, and you open it up and you're like, is this even going to keep me dry? Right? Because you can barely get one person under it. Then there's these huge golf umbrellas that you can get like a whole family of 4 under. Anybody else watch the Masters golf tournament? And they actually their umbrellas were so big, they had like towels and stuff hanging off like racks underneath their towels. These things were huge. And so here's the thing. You get to choose how broadly you want to open your umbrella. You can open it a little bit for some people, or you can say, you know what? I'm going to open my umbrella really wide. And this, by the way, also is the stepping stone to getting to inclusion also, okay? Now, this isn't just something that sounds nice. You know, we have directors and VPs of diversity and inclusion. They must have important jobs. But does it really make a difference? I'm here to tell you it does make a difference. In one case study, we were working with a national healthcare provider that had on their hourly staff an annual turnover rate of almost 50%. Low paying jobs, high turnover, high stress. And here's what they did. They said, we can't afford. How many of you would agree with 49% turnover? That's a lot. That means every year we're retraining half of our hourly staff. And so they said, we got to do something different. And so they started with their senior and upper level leaders and managers. And they put the top 700 people through a 1-day respect training course. After 7 months, their turnover dropped to 22%, just by making some really small changes, but very high traction changes in their behaviors and in their interaction styles. After 3 years, it dropped to under 9%. By their own calculations, just in turnover alone, they were saving almost $3 million a year just by not having to continually hire and retrain people. How many of you would agree? $3 million bucks, that's a lot of money. I could do a lot. Well, that was a couple of years ago, so it's probably not as much today, but you get the point. And by the way, patient satisfaction jumped up 13%. So it does have a business impact. Now, how it's going to impact you and your organization, that's what I'm going to ask you to think about. If we were to practice some of the things we're going to talk about today, how do you see it actually positively impacting your organization? We're going to do a little icebreaker activity at your table. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to think back, and I want you to talk amongst yourselves just for about a minute, 2 minutes at the most. I want you to think back to when you were younger. How young is up to you. But I want you to think specifically about people that you remember who taught you something important about how you interact and engage with other people. Particularly people who weren't like you. All right. Now, these could be parents, grandparents. It could be your first boss or supervisor, a teacher, a favorite teacher, or a coach. But what I want you to think about is, who were they and what do you remember learning from them? So just take about a minute, minute and a half at your table and share who some of these people were. And then I'm going to ask some of you to volunteer this. All right. So take about a minute, go around your table. Who comes to mind for you as being really memorable for teaching you how to engage with other people? Okay. All right. So by show of hands, how many people mentioned their parents? Okay. What are some of the things you remember? What's your first name? No. Yeah. Nikita. What do you remember learning from your parents? Being respectful. Okay. It's how you would address people. And if you forgot, then what would happen? How many of your parents were not above a little swat in the rear end, right? Okay. All right. Go ahead. What do you remember learning?
My grandfather always say that respect, being patient.
Okay. So actually,
Might not always
can you stand up?
My grandfather used to say being patient was a part of being respectful.
Mhm.
Like, you don't always understand the lesson that is in front of you. You need to be patient in developing your understanding.
Like snatch the pebble from my hand, grasshopper. Remember that? How many of you are old enough to remember Kung Fu? Anybody? All right. How many people picked a teacher or a coach? Anybody have teachers or coaches that were memorable for you? Okay. What do you remember learning from a teacher or coach? It's your supervisor. Okay. Okay. Mhm. And so what was the takeaway for you? What was the core of that lesson that you learned from this supervisor? She was bold and thought outside the box. And all management thought she was crazy. Yeah. Yeah. And now everybody wants to do it. It's tough being a trailblazer, right? Jeff, go ahead. Yeah, so it was a supervisor who was first kind of pushing the envelope for flex time. Do we have a microphone, Justin? All right. We are empowered. We will get that microphone. All right. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but here's what I want you to think about. Whoever the individual or individuals were for you, I want you to close your eyes for a second and think back to your interactions with them. How clearly do you remember them? How many of you have crystal clear memories of these people? Well, here's the thing about human memory. Most of us are blissfully ignorant in how well we actually remember things. It turns out that what we think of as memory, most of us think of as like this little motion picture reel. Oh, I remember who said what. How many of you know, just from like Thanksgivings and holiday dinners with your family, that even siblings can't agree on how the past happened, right? No, that's not how it happened. It happened. We generally speaking, only about 5% of humans have a really good ability to accurately remember anything past about 6 weeks. After that, we take it out and we put it back in. It's like taking the same file out, but every time we put it back, it's in slightly different order. But there is a part of our memory that is extremely resilient and accurate. And it's due to a part of the brain called the limbic system. How many of you have heard of the limbic system? And the limbic system records what? Our emotions, our emotional experience. So when someone says, hey, do you remember this teacher or grandpa or this or that? The very first thing that comes back online for us is how we felt when we were around them. And then we basically mold the rest of the story around that particular emotional imprint. And that's the whole point I'm going to make. We are imprinting on the people that we interact with every single day. Now, we're going to give that imprint a name. We're going to call it our legacy, which is where we got the name for our company years ago. Every time you interact with anybody, you're leaving a little chunk of you behind in their brain. And that was, how did they feel when they were around you? Is that emotional memory or that legacy, do you think that affects how well we work together? Absolutely. How many of you have certain individuals that if you saw them before they saw you, you would turn and go in a different direction? Because that legacy they have created is not necessarily one that you would want to interact with them again. That emotional legacy that we create, one of the things that it captures is trust and safety. How safe do I feel around that person? Do I trust them? And then that becomes a predictor for how much information I'm going to share with them, what I'm going to share. Am I going to be completely candid? And more importantly, am I willing to go out of my way to help them be successful? All those things are captured by that thing called legacy, or at least driven in part by that. Here's the thing. Most people never give a second thought to it. They kind of stumble into their legacy. I'm going to challenge you to rise above that. I want you to be intentional. Every time you interact with anybody, ask yourself, if I'm leaving a little chunk of me behind, what piece do I want it to be? When they see me coming, are they going to stand up tall and smile and reach and want to shake my hand? Or are they going to be like doing this and heading off in a different direction? It's your choice. But I would challenge you, be intentional with that choice and build the kind of legacy that sometime down the line, you can look in the rearview mirror and say, yeah, I did that. I did that. All right. So now let's come back to the subject at hand, respect. I want you to think about, in fact, I'm going to have you in your handout write this down. If you'll open up your handout, you'll see a continuum on that inside panel. And right to the lower right-hand corner is just some writing space. And what I'd like you to do is write down the first things that come to mind for you when I say respect is what? What is respect to you? All right, somebody shout it out. Yes, yeah, right down to the bottom right of that continuum on the inside flap. When I say respect is, somebody answer, what is it? What is it? Greeting somebody, right, what else? Listening, what else? Caring, humane, what else? Compassion, thank you. Well, guess what? You have so many good ideas, but I don't have time to ask everybody, but I do have time to ask you to pull your phone out. So what I'm going to have you do right now is I want you to pull your phone out and I want you to go to a website, a browser in your browser called Menti, MENTI.com. And when you get there, you're going to be prompted to enter a session code. Justin, can you switch us over? When you get to Menti, you'll see that code at the top, 21416318. If you will enter that, that will let you into this data capture set. We're gonna do a little crowd polling. So what I'd like you to do once you're in is type in, wait, what do you think respect is? And we're gonna see together in aggregate. When we talk about respect, what is it? Okay, earned, openness, great. What else? Okay. Value, humanity, valuing others equally. I love it. By the way, I'm going to save all of these as a PDF. And so anybody who wants these afterwards, as long as I get your email addresses, I'm going to send you this back as a follow-up from our session today. A level playing field, compassion, trusting others, openness. Excellent. Now you'll notice that some of you have described it as a concept. Others have actually gone right to a behavior, like listening, like holding space, like reflecting, like being considerate, like being patient. Those are specific behaviors. In some cases, some of you may have thought well, it's more like it's the conveyance of value. Okay, so there's a lot of ways to do that. Now, here's what we're going to do, and you can keep entering them while I go back to the next slide. Justin, slide deck, please. And you can continue to answer that. I have another word I'm going to put up here, and I want you to think about it relative to the word respect. And that word is tolerance. Respect and tolerance. Are they the same or are they different? I heard a very different. Anybody think it's the same? No? Okay, for those of you who think they're different, and I agree with you, how are they different? What's different between respect and tolerance? Your attitude about the other person. What else? What's the difference? There's no value.
Their existence.
Say that again.
You're just tolerating their existence.
Okay. So go ahead. What's the difference between respect and tolerance? With tolerance, you assume your point of view is superior. I want you to imagine, how many of you are married or have a significant other waiting for you? Imagine you came home from work one day and you were in a fabulous mood and you were smiling and your significant other, and they said, hey, you're in an awfully good mood. What's going on? Oh, and you said, I just love the people I work with. Chris said, I just love the people I work with every day. I mean, I just feel so tolerated.
You want to speak next? Okay.
How many of you think you get some funny looks? Because the word doesn't, if you had to give it a letter grade versus being respected, what letter grade would you give being tolerated? It's not a failing grade, because Lord knows you can go below that. You can be people can be intolerant, right? But it's not exactly Dean's List material either. But here's the thing, to the human brain, to a really busy human brain, sometimes we just say, hey, let's just go with tolerance today. You know why? It's easy. It doesn't take any work. It takes almost zero effort. All you got to do is put a nice big zipper on your mouth when you feel like saying something smug about somebody. And then you can go home at the end of the day and say, see, I was tolerant. I didn't say anything bad. I didn't say anything bad at all. But here's why the brain kind of likes to camp out here. A little bit of neuroscience for you. The human brain, as it turns out, is the most energy hungry organ in our entire body. Even on our slow days, if you were just watching Seinfeld reruns on your sofa, your brain would be consuming about 25% of every calorie you had consumed all day, right? Just sitting there. And on your really busy days, that can spike up to 40%. How many of you have had those days where priorities were changing on the fly? You had conflict that you hadn't planned on, that you had to resolve. And you go home at the end of the day and your brain is just smoked. How many of you had days like that? A week like that? I wonder if you could lose weight that way. What do you think? I don't think so either. But here's the thing. So the human brain is actually wired to be kind of lazy. Oh, because I don't know when I'm going to need my energy in the future. So if I can just throttle back a little bit now, when I'm dealing with you fools, and I just, we'll be okay, right? But here's the thing. That does not work if you have to interact with other people. How many of you have jobs where you actually have to work with other people? You have to interact with them. And here's where we have to actually start spending energy. But if you go back in history, in the human anthropology, when it came to dealing with others, especially others who weren't like us, were we generally good or not so good at that? There's an excellent book out. There's an Israeli anthropologist, Dr. Yuval Noah Harari, and he wrote a book called Sapiens. It's the study of humankind. Fabulous book. Basically, 50, 60,000 years ago, there were multiple kinds of humans. There were Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, Homo europus, all walking around at the same time. But the thing is, there were so fewer of us then that you could go for months without coming across another tribe or group. But when you did, what was our initial instinct? Was it like, hey, welcome to the neighborhood? What was our initial response when we, in a land of scarcity and for hunters and gatherers, We didn't know your intention. And so the safest mindset, one that today in 2023, we still have when we initially meet other people, is one of suspicion or at least apprehension, at least until I get to know you, if I'm willing to get to know you, right? But suspicion is just a mindset. There's no behavior yet, but mindsets drive behaviors, don't they? And so if my instinct around other people that aren't like me, and I come by this honestly because this is how we evolved, is one of suspicion, then you know what kind of behavior I'm likely to engage in initially is avoiding you. How many of you have people that you intentionally avoid? How many of you can see their faces and hear their voices right now? Right? Has anybody ever gotten to the parking lot at the same time that person did? And you're like, I am not walking in with that person. And so you get your phone out and you pretend like you're texting somebody, you let them get a nice head start. And then and only then do you say, okay, I think I can walk out now. How many of you have ever tried to strategically position yourself in a conference room so you wouldn't have to make eye contact with that person? Or they're taking the elevator, you think, I need the steps, I need the exercise, I'm taking the steps today, right? You actually have to spend energy to avoid people. But there's a dark side to the other side of that coin too. How many of you have ever been the person who was being avoided and you didn't want to be avoided? Do you know that we fear social isolation, which we're going to talk about a little bit later? We fear social isolation. And so if I'm being avoided and I don't know why, that takes energy too, but in the form of worry. So either way, we're spending energy here. Now, what happens if we continue going to the left and we reach the conclusion that, you know what, Chris, the differences between you and me, they're just not reconcilable. And we get to this place called hostility. How many of you have ever witnessed hostility in the workplace? Anybody? Now, it doesn't have to be physical, does it? What kind of forms can passable hostility take in today's workplace? What might be different forms of hostility? Sarcasm, passive-aggressive behaviors, creating roadblocks, intentionally making it difficult for somebody to do their work. Could hostility be demonstrated by an eye roll when somebody's talking? How many of you are like, oh, shoot, man, I'm really good at that. You're up there sharing your best idea and somebody's over here doing this. And if they really want to add emphasis, they sigh really loudly. Hostility can be any kind of behavior that harms another person in any way, physically, emotionally. How about bullying or name calling, raising your voice or shouting somebody down? It could be intentionally withholding information that's going to cause somebody to make a mistake or not make a smart decision, or simply withhold anything that you do that harms them in any way. That's hostility. And not only does it take a tremendous amount of energy to perpetrate hostility, anybody ever end up on the receiving end of somebody else's hostility? How many of you would agree that takes a lot of energy also, right? Here's the worst part about hostility. How many of you had nothing to do with the hostility, but it was going on around you? Does that affect your work? Absolutely. Now, keep in mind, I don't have any more calories than what I ate for breakfast and maybe lunch today. Once that's gone, it's gone. If you look at all the energy that it would take to either continually avoid somebody or worse yet, be in a hostile relationship with them, what is the energy that it takes to do that? What does that energy spend represent to your organization? That's lost productivity. How many of you, think of it like almost like being a weather person. If you went in somebody's house and opened up all the windows in the upstairs in the middle of wintertime, what would happen to their house? It would get really cold, right? But the furnace would kick on because we got a thermostat and start cranking out all kind of heat. But where would that heat go? Right out the window. Anytime you witness, certainly you won't be participating in it from now on, but either avoidance or hostile behaviors, I want you to recognize it for what it is. Wasted energy that will never be spent taking care of your department's or agency's mission, period. It can't be. Now, the problem with this is we're kind of wired to be this way. Where are we? Was there ever a time in our life when we were not naturally and instinctively apprehensive or suspicious around people just because they weren't like us? When we were what? when we were kids, right? What if we could wind the clock back a little bit? I have one of my favorite stories I want to share with you. How many of you like to fly Southwest Airlines? How many of you used to like to fly Southwest Airlines, right? I still like Southwest because their people are generally pretty kind and cool. Before the pandemic, I was flying from St. Louis back to BWI, and these were my two row mates, right? I'm an A-list flyer on Southwest. I'm usually one of the first 15 or 20 people on the plane. I was coming back from a financial services client. I was very busy. I had like email. So I picked like a forward aisle seat on the left-hand side, barely even noticing that there was a young girl already sitting by the window. And so I stowed my book bag under the seat and I pulled out my phone. And I was getting ready to check my messages. And a flight attendant came over and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Excuse me." I said, "Yes." And she goes, "Would you mind keeping this middle seat open?" I looked over and then I noticed that there was a young girl already sitting there. And I said, "Well, this is Southwest. That's kind of odd. I didn't think you could save seats." She goes, "Well, let me explain. I have another young person flying without their parent, and I thought I would put them together." I said, "Yeah." Selfishly, I was thinking to myself, more elbow room for me, right? A small one, please. And so the rest of the plane fills up. And finally, the last person, it's this kid. He comes dragging his book bag behind him. And he looks lost. And the flight attendant points him to my row. So he comes over. He says, "Excuse me, I think I'm supposed to sit here." I get up, let him in. Immediately, he looks over and he sees the girl at the window. He says, "Hi, I'm Evan." And she looks over, surprised that somebody was talking to her. And she says, "I'm Yvonne." He goes, "Hi, Yvonne. Where are you flying to?" As he was sitting down, she goes, "I'm flying to Columbus, Ohio." He said, "No way. I'm going to Columbus, Ohio too. That is so cool." Which immediately caught my attention because guess where I grew up? Columbus, Ohio, right? And so they start talking a mile a minute. "Well, who are you going to see?" He asks her. He goes, "I'm going to see my Gammy and Papa." "Your grandparents?" "I'm going to see my grandparents too." That is so wild. Well, next thing you know, they're going back and forth a mile a minute. I'm thinking, "Oh, this is great. This will last about another 2 minutes and then they'll be," it didn't. When everybody else was like stowing their book bag, they were pulling theirs out. And immediately, we hadn't even pulled away from the gate yet. They started doing an inventory. "What'd you bring in yours? What'd you bring in yours?" First thing out was the snacks, which without them saying a word, they figured out were to be shared. Try that the next time you're on a flight. "That looks really good. Would you mind sharing that?" Right? And so they start sharing their snacks. Next thing, "What kind of games did you bring?" Well, Evan reached in. He goes, "I got this game cube. I got this Rubik's Cube and I got a Game Boy." And Yvonne had like the stuffed animal you can see. And she had a bunch of puzzle books that her mom had given her. But then Evan reached deep into his backpack and he pulled out a piece of nostalgia that almost made me weep. It was the Sony Walkman CD player. And she goes, "Look what I got." And she goes, "What's that?" You know your old win. He goes, "It's a CD player." What was her next question? "What's it do?" Right? And he says, "Watch this." And he touches the little button, the big button, and like magic, the lid goes, "Ee." How many of you had one of those? Come on now. And he goes, "The music is on this disc." And she might as well have been in like a museum or something. She was like, "That is so cool." She goes, "But I didn't bring my earbuds." He goes, "Oh, that's okay. We'll just share mine." And I had this epiphany like, wow, had this been two adults sitting next to each other, we've all done it, what would the behavior have probably been? Yeah. Some people don't even give you the chance to say, hey. They put their earphones on right away, which means leave me the heck alone, right? But kids are different because kids have not learned all those things that by the time we're adults, we use to categorize people, right? Kids are so very different. Here's my challenge and my question. What if without losing all the important stuff, the things that actually do keep us safe, we could reconnect with a little bit of that instinctual curiosity of things that were different, of people who were different, that we had when we were kids? Because rather than avoiding people, if I'm curious about you, I'm probably going to do what? Let's talk, right? We approach and we engage the other person and we start sharing information. both things that we have in common, but also things that are different and unique about us. And that takes us to this place called respect, right? Here's the important part. And with your pen or highlighter, I want you to circle engagement. You cannot get to respect if you are not willing to open up, roll up your sleeves and start talking to people. You just can't get there because there's no other way to share information that we need. Now, here's what's really important about this. It's great when we find things that we have in common with other people, isn't it? But what about the things that make us different? Are those important too? Absolutely. One of my role models and one of my mentors and friends in college was my dorm director. His name was Dale Linder. Dale was my dorm director in Baker Hall. You're going to think this was kind of nerdy. I was dorm hall president of Baker Hall. 1989 through, I'm sorry, not 82. It went 84 through 85, right? And Dale, to say that I was an occasional pain in his rear end would be an understatement. Dale was very unique in my world for one reason. He was a Black man. And I had never had anybody, I'd never had a Black teacher, a Black coach, a Black coworker, anything up until I grew up in a pretty, I'll just say privileged part of Columbus. I grew up in Bexley, Ohio. And I just didn't have a lot of experience, firsthand experience with people of color. And so Dale took me on as his project. Now he was also, how many of you remember when you were 19 and you knew everything? Just ask you, right? That was me. And I was a student leader, and Dale was teaching one of the university's very first diversity and inclusion courses. And he basically guilted me into taking it. He said, Paul, you are going to be taking my class, right? I said, oh, sure, Dale, why not? And we were walking back from class one day, and he asked me a really important question. He said, Paul, stop. Yeah. He says, when you look at me, what do you see? And with the confidence that only a 19-year-old can muster, I said, I see my friend Dale. Yeah, I'm your friend Dale, but as a person, as a human being, what do you see? Now, what do you think he wanted me to say? He wanted me to say a Black man, but I thought that was a trick because my whole life, I thought the message was don't pay attention to things like that because we're all the same on the inside. How many of you remember we're all the same on the inside, right? Dale's message to me was BS on that. He said, Paul, he said, I'm a Black man. You can say that. You can acknowledge that. And by the way, if you can't acknowledge that I'm a Black person, you cannot respect me. That hurt my feelings. As a 19-year-old, I didn't know what the heck. I said, Dale, why do you say that? He said, because if you can't acknowledge that I'm a Black person, that means you're not even going to be a little bit curious to try to understand how my journey through this world is going to be different than yours as a white person. Talk about someone who knocked me off my horse and opened a door that I didn't even know was there. That was Dale. Dale and I are still friends to this day. He still lives in Columbus, Ohio, and he is married with 2 kids. I hate this picture. This is right after the pandemic. This is me in my Michelin Man face. But anyways, we are still friends to this day because of the connections we made back when I was 19 years old. And I couldn't be more proud of that friendship. If I were to give you or offer you a definition of respect, here's what I would put out there for your consideration. It is first and foremost an active process. It takes work. If you're looking for something easy, it's simple, but it's not easy, right? It's an active process of non-judgmentally, or better yet, curiously engaging people. And this is where you get to decide how far you want to spread your umbrella from all backgrounds. And here's why we do this. Now, our brain, your brain, my brain is always weighing the consequences of spending energy. If I spend energy to get to know anybody, what am I going to get from that? And here's what we get. We increase both our awareness of each other, but also our effectiveness working together. Why do we become more effective working with people that we know well? Why? We have an understanding, which means that we're going to be more predictable around each other. How many of you have coworkers that you know what they're going to do before they even do it? By the way, how many of you have coworkers who are also good personal friends, right? That's a whole nother conversation, but that's fabulous. And once we get to that point, and oh, by the way, we may also be fostering trust between us. We trust each other's intentions. We can actually start to take shortcuts that allow us to get work done more quickly with fewer errors and less energy. It's a win-win-win, right? So we actually get something for spending that energy. But here's the most important part of the definition. It's about engaging each other in a manner that esteems both me and you. Whoever put down value when I asked what respect is, yes, it's about the conveyance of value and worthwhileness. How many of you would agree that if we did nothing else but made it part of our job every time we go to work to try to make sure the other person felt valued in some way, that by itself could be a difference maker in our respective workplaces? It could be a huge difference maker. Now, question for those in leadership roles. Can you still hold people accountable for behaviors that need to change or performance that needs to improve, but still do it in a way that makes them feel valued? Yeah. How would you do that? How would you do that? Clear expectations. What else? Accountability. Remember, we were talking about that limbic system. This is really important here. If you were giving me feedback about something that I needed to get better at, what would make me more willing to actually want to hear what you had to say, even if it was constructive? What would I want to believe about you? That you cared about me to the point where you wanted me to be successful and you were going to be there to help me get there. How many of you, if you knew categorically that the person you work for, they wanted you to be successful and they were going to do whatever it took to help you get there, how many of you would say, yeah, sign me up for that? I want that feedback, right? So I would suggest to you that respect actually requires that we hold each other accountable. Otherwise, if I'm not doing the job and you don't tell me, I'm going to flame out at some point, right? So we owe it to each other to hold each other accountable when we practice respect. Now, we're going to do a little exercise. We're going to limit it to about 6 minutes because we got a little bit of a late start today. I want everybody to pair up with one person at your table. If you have an odd number, you can have a group of 3. But here's what we're going to do. It's called connecting through experiences. Try to find a single person if you can, because I want to try to give each person about 3 minutes in this exercise. When you are the interviewer, for 3 minutes, your job is to learn as much about the other person as you can. And then I'm going to say, switch roles. And then the interviewer becomes the interviewee. I'm going to give you some questions that you can pick from. But your job is not to blow through these questions as quickly as you can. Your job is to learn as much about the other person in 3 minutes as you can. And looking for points of commonality, but also points of uniqueness. Before I show you the questions, figure out who you're going to interview. I want everybody to look at your table. Who are you going to interview? Okay. It works better if we have a pair. Now, figure out who's going to go first. If you have a 3-person group, you're going to have to do this 2 minutes at a time. But here's the questions I want you to pick from. The first question. Tell me about you in a nutshell. If you and I are going to be working together, what do I need to know about you? Your choice. Tell me what the most important things I need to know about you in a nutshell. Second question. Who is a person to whom you are very grateful? And why? What special role does that person have in your life's history? Number 3, what is one of your favorite memories from your 20s? Keep it clean, please. What made that experience so amazing? Here's another question you could pick from. What is your training superpower? When you really are on, what superpower is activated and how'd you get that superpower? And the last one, what is an important long-term goal that you want to accomplish and why is that so important to you? All right. You can go, if you can get through all these, great, but start and go as far as you can in 3 minutes and then I'm going to tell you to switch roles. Ready? Begin.
You're recording this.
Okay, you are approximately at the halfway point. Finish the question that you're on and then switch roles, please. The interviewee is now the interviewer. Okay, we've got about 1 minute to go. 1 minute to go. Hmm. 2 minutes ago. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up the conversations. How many of you could have kept on talking for another couple minutes? No problem whatsoever. How many of you are still talking and you're going to keep on talking right over me? There you go. How many of you learned something interesting about the other person that you did not know before? How many of you found something that you had in common with them that you wouldn't have known otherwise? All right. What is different about these questions than the questions we typically engage our colleagues, at least at work, in? Say that again. Sure. There's not, yeah, they're normally pretty narrow. They're surface level. How many of you would agree that these are kind of personal? Not the question, but my answer could be kind of personal, right? And any time we go into that personal space, especially with someone new, it can't help us make us feel a little bit what? Starts with the letter V, vulnerable. Ever hear that word today yet? Vulnerable. I would put forth that if you really want to know if you're making progress towards respectfulness in your culture, look for vulnerability. Are we becoming more willing to make ourselves vulnerable? Putting some information out there that could be used against me, but I'm going to trust that you're not going to do that, right? Now, here's the other thing. What you were really just engaged in was a gift exchange. Think about it. It was a gift exchange. What was the gift that you gave to each other? Freedom to share, right? So, see, I always like it when some people, they raise their hand and say, well, I told them all this wonderful information about me that they were dying to know. Aren't you special, right? The gift was you being curious with no other agenda other than to learn about them. That was your goal. When was the last time someone said, hey, tell me about you, you got 3 minutes, and they weren't a paid therapist? We just don't get that freedom normally, right? And so when someone says with no other agenda, I just want to get to know about you, what a great, that's actually a gift. That is a gift. Now, my challenge to you is this. How can you take that exercise and put your own flavor to it when you go back to work? I do not recommend you stopping people in the hall and saying, so tell me about a person you really respect and why. You've got 60 seconds. Go, David. What? But what are things that people usually don't mind talking about? Themselves. But if you go into somebody's office, now I know, virtually this becomes a little bit more challenging, but if you went into somebody's physical office, what kind of clues do we leave laying around? Pictures. Who doesn't love to talk about their kids or their grandkids or complain about their kids and grandkids or their pets or their vacations, right? All you have to do is ask a question and then do what? Listen. Without your cell phone in hand. You may have to practice that one, right? Give them your undivided attention, if only for a minute. And all they know when you walk away is they're standing a little taller and a little bit prouder because someone took an interest in them. And if you really want to blow their mind, remember something that they told you a week later. Say, hey, how's your grandson doing, by the way? And then they're like, whoa, who was that respect ninja, right? And so use your own version. I challenge you the rest of the conference. You're going to see, they're going to know you're doing this because I'm putting you all up to this. But see what you can learn about people in little 60-second chunks here and there. All right, let's go ahead and move into, we've only got about 2 hours left. So I want to get going here. I want to share a real quick quote with you from one of my colleagues. He's also an author. He's also the head of the neuroscience department at UCLA, where my son Ryan is a junior. His name is Dr. Matt Lieberman, and he wrote a book called Social: Why Our Brains Are Wired to Connect. And he had this great quote. He said, love and belonging might seem like a convenience that we can do without, but our biology, namely human biology, is built to thirst for connection because it is linked to our most basic survival needs. Human beings are pretty awesome creatures, but if you compare us to other animals, especially earlier on, were we all that in a bag of chips? I mean, were we bigger than all the other animals? Were we faster than all the other animals? Were we stronger than all the other animals? No, we were small, slow, and weak. In theory, we should have been prey to a larger predator species, but somehow we not only became masters of our own domain, but the entire planet. How did we do that? Opposable thumbs helped, but according to my friend Matt, he said what it really was the human brain, and not just that it's bigger. He said, but we have the most sophisticated social wiring of any other creature on the planet. Not only can we communicate within groups, but we can communicate between groups. And we actually use that brain, that incredible brain that we have, to define what our society looks like, or what we want it to look like in the future. So important was our communication capability that it actually became really crucial in determining our tribal status. What was one of the worst punishments that could be handed out to somebody for going against the best interests of their tribe? Being banished or exiled, right? And the likelihood of you being able to survive, let alone thrive, without the rest of your tribe there to support you against the elements, against predators, against other tribes, was slim to none. It was almost like a death sentence. Here in 2023, we still have that same genetically implanted need to feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And when we treat each other with respect, that's what it conveys. You're a valued part of our group. That's why this is so incredibly important to us. And that contributes to something we talked about earlier, which is psychological safety. Now, I know we're going to run short on time a little bit. So what I want to do is I want to accelerate part of the conversation. What I really want you to do is I want you to think about what respect actually looks like. On the next page in your handout, what I want you to do is think back to a time where you distinctly remember being treated in a way that made you feel respected. Who was it and what did they do? In the left-hand column, did they give you praise or public acknowledgement for something? Did they offer assistance to you? Did they just come in and do a well check and say, hey, how you doing? What did they do that made you feel, quote, respected? But then in the right-hand column, right across from that, what I want you to do is write down all the emotions that came online for you because of that experience. How did it, what would be the different words you would use to describe how it made you feel? You're going to end up with a column that looks something like this. Looks like on the left, feels like on the right. This is going to be on the third page. The inside, under where it says respect and emotions, behaviors and actions, and then right underneath that, write the emotions down. Now, if we could go back to Menti, Justin, if you wouldn't mind. All right, so we're going to do actions and behaviors first. We have, I don't know, 70, 80 people in the room still right now. What I'd like you to do is let's map out together what all those different behaviors looked like, at least to us, that we interpreted as being signs of respect. Okay, so go back to Menti. Let's see what all these behaviors look like. This is on Menti, right? And you're going to go back to Menti and make sure you have that same code up there. Okay, so I was praised, great. I was supported. What else? Encouraging my success, open to my ideas, great. Awarded, praised, trusted. They heard me. Okay, Saluted me. I like it. Called me sir. That's something I like about Georgia. Mr. Paul. All right. Ask for my advice. That's a really big one. Ask my opinion or ask for my advice. Encouraged me. Didn't shame me. A willing partner. Not just asked for my advice, but took and applied my advice or my recommendation. Okay. Here's the thing. Coming from whichever background brought you here today, respect may look a little bit different. But I'm only going to figure out what it looks like to you if I do what? If I get to know you, right? How many of you have heard of the golden rule? Treat other people the way. Well, what if I'm not like you? Right? Anybody ever hear the platinum rule? The platinum rule says treat other people the way they want to be treated. But I'm not going to know that unless I spend some time getting to know you. Now, okay. And again, I'm going to send this list to anybody who wants it afterwards. Next question, I want you to think about the impact. Think of the behaviors as the delivery vehicle, but the impact or the payload is in the emotion. In this next slide, I want you to enter what were the different emotions that you experienced because of those behaviors. All right. I felt valued, happy, excited, confident, part of the team, hopeful, a sense of pride. Now, I want you to imagine for a moment that our emotions actually had mass. I'm at work and I just came out of a staff meeting and somebody asked for my opinion. And they also gave me credit for something I did in front of the rest of my team. And so I'm walking out of that staff meeting and these are the emotions that I'm carrying around in my backpack or that you would be. If you were carrying those in your backpack, first of all, is that a heavy load or a light load? That's got helium in it. This is like carrying me around the rest of the day. And what kind of work are you likely to be doing the rest of the day? How many of you would be doing your best work if that was typical for your emotional experience when you were working? How many of you would say that's when I'm doing my best work? Absolutely. I have some bad news for you. You were drugged. Slides, please. It turns out that all those positive emotions that we were experiencing, first of all, what did those behaviors have in common? This. Respect can be practiced by any action, behavior, or decision that makes another person or a group feel recognized, valued, or relevant within the community that sustains them. It could be anything as long as it's appropriate for that individual, right? But here's what you probably didn't know. Those things that we feel and experience as emotions, it's really it's the predictable result of brain science. When someone makes me feel those things, here's what's really happened. My brain has released serotonin, oxytocin, and dopamine, very powerful neurohormones that don't just stay in my brain, they affect my heart, my lungs, my breathing, my digestion, everything. That's why we say we feel a certain way. When this becomes, ideally, our group chemistry, not just your chemistry or mine, but our group's chemistry, here's what we can tie this back to statistically. We know that higher levels of respect correlate to a higher level of job satisfaction. That's not rocket science. Improved physical or emotional health. People call in sick less often. And when they do get sick, they come back more quickly, right? We know that our ability to attract, develop, and keep our very best employees goes way up. It's not that people will never leave, but you got to bribe them away because who wants to leave a place where I feel valued and appreciated, right? Now, at some point, everybody has a price, right? But we don't want to lose people unnecessarily. Improved creativity and innovation. Why would we be more creative and innovative in a respectful culture? Emotional safety. I feel safe to raise my hand and put my ideas out there with someone going, right? higher customer satisfaction scores, whatever that means for your agency or department, and higher productivity, growth, and resilience, all because of this thing called respect. Now, if we had more time, we would do the same thing with disrespect. But I'm gonna kind of fast forward. How many of you can still remember to this day times when you were treated with disrespect? It turns out that those experiences are not only more durable, but they are faster to recall. Why do you think that our brains actually find it easier to recall things that hurt us in the past? It hurt us. We are wired, your brain's number one job, just like mine, is to keep us safe. And it does not distinguish between physical threats or emotional threats. Anything that hurt me hurt. In fact, which do you think we remember longer? Physical pain or emotional pain? Emotional pain, right? And so I'm not going to ask you to, but there could be all kinds, whether it's being talked over, interrupted, being gossiped about, being talked down to, being yelled at, having foul language or racial slurs or something, or gender slurs thrown at you. Those are all very, very hurtful. And when we find, if we were able to map those out today, what you'd find is they all leave us feeling unsafe. Look at those emotions I just use as examples: devalued, unimportant, dumb. Remember that backpack I had? Imagine that's what you were carrying around with you. Heavy or light now? That's real heavy, but it's only 10 in the morning. You got a full day of work to do, and you can't take this off. So how's this going to affect your work? What kind of work are you going to be doing? Not my best. Maybe monster.common, right? And it's not funny. Here's the sad truth about this. By the way, here's what disrespectful behaviors have in common. It's shown by actions, behaviors, or decisions that diminish, not cultivate and build, but diminish another person's standing, value, or importance within the community. And that's why you have what you or I might not think is disrespectful. We have to get to know those things about other people, right? But what that actually does is it triggers something you all have heard of. That's the fight or flight response in the brain. Cortisol and adrenaline get released by my brain, but picked up by all the other organs in my body. First thing that happens, part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is basically your executive functioning center. It's the part of your brain that makes decisions, figures out priorities, resolves problems and conflicts. That part of your brain says, you don't have time for me. You got to keep yourself safe right now. And so literally that part of my brain, the part that got hired, goes offline at a time when you probably need it the most, right? But that's what disrespect does. It immobilizes the part of my brain that got hired to do the work. Now, if that becomes our chemistry, and by the way, quick show of hands, how many of you have ever left a place of employment because of the way you were treated? Look, just in this room, I'm going to guesstimate it's at least 10 or 15% of the group. All right. Here's what happens when disrespect becomes too rampant. Lower, no emotional engagement. People become paycheck collectors. How many of you know a paycheck collector? I just come in to do my job. Is it my best? No, but it's enough to get my paycheck. I do have bills to pay, right? All right. We become much more prone to stress-related illnesses, specifically cardiovascular disease, because what cortisol does is it actually causes a degradation of our cardiovascular system. We actually become more prone to neurological diseases too, because what cortisol also does is it attacks the synaptic pathways that allow our brain cells to talk to each other. And so we become slower, less able to solve problems, and actually over time can actually start losing brain cells. That's how toxic disrespect can be to us. Increased absenteeism and accidents. As one of my other clients said, I'm not sick, but I'm sick of y'all. Right? So all of a sudden, now imagine I'm doing really important work. I'm doing really important work and I'm driving a forklift, but my brain is still thinking about something somebody did to me at 10 o'clock this morning. Do you think I might be compromised from a safety perspective? Absolutely. Turnover becomes an issue. Information hoarding or hiding, customer satisfaction in the toilet, and ultimately below average organizational productivity and resilience. All of this because of something that we can absolutely control, and it's disrespect. All right. So let's go ahead and wrap up. By the way, there's some additional slides I don't have time to go through because I am not keeping you past happy hour. You will start throwing stuff at me. There's some things that we can do and stop and not do. If you ever, by the way, how many of you have ever accidentally, you found out about it after the fact, treated somebody in a way they thought was disrespectful, right? We don't have perfect 20/20 vision all the time. There's some things that we should do and some things that we shouldn't do. We always want to take a step back, take a deep breath, and look for patterns. Is this something that's normal? If it's not, then just let little things go. But here's the thing, I think, and this is really important under the don't do. Do not tolerate consistently disrespectful behavior from anybody. Who will that hurt? You, but potentially other people, because if they do it to you, they're probably going to do it to other people also. All right. What I'd like you to do is, again, on your own time, if you look to the back cover, there's a section called the 12 Rules of Respect. I would love to spend more time on that, but we got kind of clipped. And so I'm going to let you kind of pick the ones that you think are most important, right? There's nonverbal communication, learning to be wrong on occasion, that's important. Apologizing, super important. Intentionally engaging others in ways that build their esteem. Real simple model. Imagine everybody has a little piggy bank strapped to their hip when you interact with them. You're going to do one of two things when you interact with them. You're either going to make a deposit or you're going to make a withdrawal, right? How many of you've learned to stay away from certain people because you go broke if you spend too much time with them, right? Choose to be a depositor when you're around other people. If everybody made that choice, we would become incredibly rich together. Or we can make each other bone poor too, right? So make a choice to be someone who makes deposits in other people. And the last one, smile. It's a nonverbal, but an important one. All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up. So as a special way of saying thanks for having me today and sitting through the session, if you text the word respect, just think of Aretha, R-E-S-P-E-C-T, right? To 66866, you'll get a little ping back that says, please just send me your email address. And what we'll do is we'll send you the first 2 chapters of the book completely for free. Now, I'm also, you have a tear off on your handout. If you submit your handout, your tear off, if you don't want any information, you just want a book, we're going to be picking 5 books and sending them out to people afterwards. I just need to have your email address so I can get your mailing address at some point. All right. Do you think this makes a difference at work? All right. Quick quote. One of our longest clients is the DuPont organization. I've been working with them since 2009. We have deployed this program to probably close to 70,000 DuPont people on 5 continents. Ana Samolinos, who is their Respect for People champion, she wrote afterwards, and this is actually in my book, as gratifying as it has been to hear the positive personal feedback from our employees, the Respect Initiative is very much a business growth strategy enabler. Employees emotionally connect and contribute hard to an organization that values and allows them to grow both as human beings and professionals. We believe that the legacy respect process positively impacts our employee value proposition and strengthens our ability to retain and attract the very best talent in the marketplace. It continues to be an unforgettable journey for our corporation and has become instrumental in impacting the way we conduct business internally and externally. Right? At some point, what we breed and cultivate inside should start to spill outside the organization to our other stakeholders as well. All right. How can you make a difference? Number 1, don't be a bystander. Make a decision to get involved. Stand up, advocate for, and champion the inclusion of respect as a core organizational value, and make sure that if it already is, that people are actually toeing the line, walking the walk. Use an onboarding process and your various training events to connect emotionally with new employees. Let them know right off the bat, we care about you. Make them feel valued and you will hook them for life. Report and address reports of disrespect quickly and decisively. Do not let the cancer spread. How many of you have seen that happen? 1 or 2 people start treating people poorly and nobody does anything about it, and it becomes the apple that spoils the rest of the apples, right? And finally, encourage your teams to create their own respect standards. I have the things that make me feel respected, but your teams may be different. Let them empower your teams to define, what do we want respect to look like? Because if they define it, they own it. And then they'll hold each other accountable to it also. All right. Now, and then walk the talk yourself. Last thing. I'm going to plant the seed for maybe next year. Using curiosity to cultivate engagement and then respect, that actually gets the gears turning to something even more powerful, which is inclusion. And that's a whole nother story. But we can't get to inclusion if we don't get to respect first. All right. I'm going to ask everybody to stand up. Last thing we're going to do today. We are going to create the very longest human chain in Ocean City this week. So I would like everybody to grab the hand or put your hand on the shoulder of somebody. And let's see if we can get everybody connected in here. Okay. All right. Remember, this is the last thing before happy hour and dinner. All right. I want to wrap up where we started today. Remember, every one of us is going to create a legacy somehow, some way. And I'm going to challenge you to be intentional with that process. Look around the room and imagine that these are all the people that have your back, all the people that care about you and want you to be successful. I found this incredible piece of prose just this week that I wanted to share with you. And it's from an author and a poet named Ross Gay, Inciting Joy. All sorrow is, on some elemental level, beneath cause and circumstance, an act of forgetting our connection to life, to one another, to the grand interbelonging of existence. All joy is the act of remembering, the hand outstretched for reconnection, for felicitous contact between our othernesses. Let's celebrate our othernesses and each other this week. And remember, we're not here for a long time. We're here for, all right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Oh, my pleasure.
Excellent, excellent.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you again, Paul Meshanko. Thank you so much. Let's hear it one more time for Paul. At this time, I just want to let everyone know that we have a little bit of a break before dinner. Dinner will be served at 6. You are welcome to relax. You can go downstairs if you need to take calls or need to do that thing called WORK. Go walk outside, get some fresh air. But please do come back at 6 o'clock because we have some delicious food for dinner and a little spicy treat too. So so please do come back at 6 for dinner and enjoy your break.
What year did